Hello everyone, many thanks for joining, I really appreciate it. Whilst we wait for everyone to come in, I will update on two other things around AWS that may be relevant. So in February we were pleased to publish the second phase of our impact evaluation of the AWS Standard system, focusing on the good water governance outcome of the AWS Standard. The evaluation confirms that AWS certification drives positive water stewardship impacts, gives sites higher profile and credibility, provides structure and motivation for continued improvement. I would ask you to review the report yourselves. There's a link to it coming in the chat now, I believe, or it can be downloaded from the resources section of our website later on. I would say that it's particularly useful for any of you that are looking to build a case internally for investing in certification. Next up, a reminder that the AWS Global Water Stewardship Forum takes place in Edinburgh on Tuesday the 23rd and Wednesday the 24th of June. I'm slightly biased, but I would say it's the highlight of every working year, and if you've never been, then I would strongly recommend you doing so. General admission is now open. Members each receive a free ticket, so that also means that spaces are limited, so I'd advise registering sooner rather than later. Alongside colleagues from the water stewardship community, we will also be hosting a water logs event all day on the Thursday the 25th, so that takes place in the same venue on the day after the forum, Thursday 25th. Registrations for that are opening shortly, and it will be in the AWS newsletter, so please also bear that date in mind if you are booking travel. I'd say that we're also pleased to offer simultaneous interpretation for this session into Spanish. So to change to Spanish, please use the interpretation icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. It might be located in the More section. Once selected, you will hear the session in Spanish. If you have any issues, please just message us in the chat. Okay, so housekeeping over and on to today's session. For those that don't know me, I'm Scott McCready. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at the Alliance for Water Stewardship. I'll introduce the agenda, then I'll chair the Q&A at the end. Before I get to that, I just wanted to open with a few words on why today is an important day in the evolution of water stewardship and of AWS. So the International Water Stewardship Standard, more commonly known as the AWS Standard, is central to what the Alliance for Water Stewardship is. It's a core manifestation of our mission, which is to ignite and nurture global and local leadership on credible water stewardship. We're really pleased and proud of the changes that have been made. We see them as enhancing practicality, so it is easier to use. Utility, it connects with more sustainability frameworks. Value, it relates more to reporting and other kind of incentive-based issues around standard. And it does so without minimising the standard's impact at sites and catchments. So in a world in which the water cycle is intensifying, climate change is increasing unpredictability, water quality concerns are growing, and businesses are facing rising scrutiny and consumer expectations, we believe that version 3.0 equips companies to respond to these realities with greater confidence and effectiveness. Last week we officially launched version 3 at an in-person event in Tokyo. Our virtual session today continues that introduction by walking you through what's new in version 3.0. To begin with, I will hear from my colleague José González, who's Head of Capacity Development and System Integrity. So José leads the unit responsible for managing the standard and certification. Thereafter, José will hand over to Tyler Farrow, AWS Standards Manager. Tyler is the person who led the revision process, so thank you very much, Tyler. Tyler will then hand over to Technical Committee members Laura Kowalski and Fridtjof Behnsen for their reflections on the new standard and the process that led to it. After that, we'll hear from an AWS member who has a lot of experience in using the standard, Scott Oram of Haleon. And after Scott, Tyler will then close off the presentations by highlighting some key points in the transition towards version 3.0. Hopefully this will have answered all of your questions, but if not, we have time for some Q&A at the end. One bit of housekeeping. Can you please put your questions into the Q&A box, not the chat box? And also notice that if time is limited, I'll be selecting questions with the most universal relevance to the topic and to this webinar rather than going through in an order of sequence. If any questions aren't answered, I'm more than happy to kind of answer them on email or whatever later on. Okay, and with that, I will hand over to José. José?
Thanks, Scott, and hi everyone. Welcome to this session introducing the new version of the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name is José Manuel González. I'm working as a head of integrity and capacity development within AWS. And AWS as a voluntary standard for sustainability is a complex system. All of them are by definition. They try to encompass many different but interrelated topics into a set of verifiable requirements that can work independently as a methodology for implementation, but also can be audited as a part of a certification process. And thinking on that, we are members of the ICL Alliance. We stick to the ICL's credibility principles, and we are compliant with the ICL Code of Best Practices that defines the values of a credible sustainability system. Following the principles for continuous improvement and to keep adding value to the users, we review the standard at least every 5 years, and we do it through a process that is global, inclusive, transparent, and shaped by consensus. This new version we are introducing this week is the outcome of a complex and long reviewing process that started in mid-2023 and culminated at the end of 2025 with the overwhelming support during the vote for its approval among the members of our alliance. During these 2.5 years, successive drafts of the new version were developed considering the feedback received, reducing ambiguity, removing redundancy, increasing practicality, and paying attention to growing concerns like climate change effects or the biodiversity depending on freshwater ecosystems. We also integrated the lessons learned from the use of the previous versions of the standard during the previous 10 years. The result, what you have today in your hands, is a genuine reflection of the consensus of the stakeholders' contribution, with more than 3,000 comments received, and the dedication and passion for water stewardship of the members of the AWS Technical Committee that represent private companies, public sector, and civil society organizations. The version 3.0 of our standard is shorter in number of requirements, but allows for a streamlined implementation of its core elements, interlinking stakeholders' engagement and collective action, while pushing continuous improvement on site and promoting leadership at catchment level. At the same time, it strengthens clarity, supports inclusivity, and enables more effective action in the face of water challenges that are becoming even more complex. So thank you for your contribution to water stewardship and for the recognition given to our standard. Now my colleague Tyler Farrow will introduce you to the details of the review and the revision process, as well as the main elements of this new version of the AWS standard. Tyler, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Jose, and thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Tyler Farrow. I am Standards Manager with AWS. Before I get into the material of today's session, just wanted to reflect a little bit. I personally have got involved with the standard over a decade ago, helping to support sites in East Africa with implementation. Actually working with the third site, I think, to be certified globally. So seeing how far that we've come from then, it's really it's really amazing to see the progress that we've made. I'm really excited for this new chapter ahead with version 3 of the standard, and just really want to acknowledge all the contributions of the team to get us to this point. It's been a huge effort over the last few months, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to do. So I'm quickly going to give an overview, an introduction to version 3 and the process for developing it, as well as an overview of the major changes from version 2 to version 3. So as Scott touched on, really when we started this revision process, we had 3 major aims. The first was to increase the practicality of the standard, to streamline it for companies, to be able to implement cost effectively at scale. The second was utility, to align the standard with broader sustainability agendas and priorities to enhance kind of the value and co-benefits of the standard. And the third was value, so strengthening integration of the standard with corporate level reporting for our users. In terms of the governance and decision making for the process, as José mentioned, we followed ICL's Code of Good Practice, which I think brought a level of kind of rigor and credibility to the process. Has been a really useful framework for us for development of this third version. It was AWS Technical Committee that had overall responsibility for the revision. They were the body that essentially that approved the standard before it went to the members for vote. And ultimately, it was you, the AWS members, who voted to adopt version 3 of the AWS Standard. For those who aren't as familiar, the AWS Technical Committee is the governance body of AWS that's responsible for development and revision of standards, of guidance, and the certification requirements. So they are elected by AWS members, and they represent the 3 chambers of membership: civil society, private sector, and public sector. Typically, the technical committee would meet about quarterly, 4 times a year, but the demand from this revision process has meant that we've essentially met every month for probably almost the last year to year and a half. So I really just want to recognize the contributions of the TC. They've gone above and beyond, I think, their duties over the last couple of years, and we wouldn't have been able to do this without them. Luckily, we have 2 members of the TC with us here today, Laura Kowalski and Fridtjof Behnsen, who will share their reflections on the revision process and version 3. In terms of the development process, so this kicked off in 2023 with a review of version 2 of the standard. So we did an internal review and solicited feedback through a survey. We heard from 235 respondents essentially on what they liked about version 2 and what they saw as areas for improvement. Based on this, we made the decision to undertake a major revision of the standard. We also determined the aims of the revision process and priority areas for revision. From there, we developed working papers and proposals in a number of thematic areas, a number of which I'll touch on today, such as climate change and biodiversity. These are reviewed by the TC to develop a first draft. That first draft went for public consultation, and we received over 2,000 comments from 105 respondents from 29 countries around the world. So we obviously had our work cut out for us to analyze that feedback, to identify the substantive issues, and develop a second draft as a standard. That second draft then went for another round of public consultation, where we received over 1,200 comments from 82 respondents, again from 29 countries. And then that allowed us to develop, analyze the feedback and develop the final draft, which was approved by the TC. From there, following approval from the technical committee, the final draft was submitted to AWS members for vote in November, December of last year. The vote was subject to our vote balancing methodology, which we apply to any matters for which it's important to have equal influence across the 3 membership categories of civil society, private sector, and public sector. And the standard was approved quite resoundingly, with 93% of respondents voting in favor and an overall voter turnout of just over 43%. So a really strong endorsement from our membership for version 3 of the standard. And just to say that the launch was officially last week in Tokyo. We've now launched the standard obviously in English, as well as several translated versions, including Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, Bangla, and French, and perhaps Arabic. Yeah, Arabic as well. So I'll now provide an overview of the high-level changes in version 3 of the standard. There is a summary document which really gives the details, requirement by requirement, of what's changed from version 2 to version 3. A link to that will be provided in the chat. But today I'm just going to give a high-level overview of what we think are the most substantive changes in version 3. But I'll start off really by talking about what kind of remains the same. So version 3 of the standard still will be very recognizable to our users. The standard follows 5 steps, which are gather and understand, commit and plan, implement, evaluate, and communicate and disclose. So this remains the same in version 3 of the standard. I think it's something that's appreciated by our users and something that we've decided to retain. The standard is intended to achieve 5 outcomes. These remain largely the same from version 2. There's just been one change. So the outcome areas are good water governance, sustainable water balance, good water quality status, and the change has been to healthy freshwater ecosystems and biodiversity, which replaces important water-related areas, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. And finally, the 5th outcome of safe water, sanitation, and hygiene for all. So each of the steps of the standard consists of a number of criteria and related requirements which sites must conform with to be certified against the standard. So one of the major aims around this revision obviously was practicality and delivering a streamlined version of the standard, which I'm happy to report we've managed to do. Version 3 has 72 requirements, which were previously known as indicators. This is 26 fewer than in version 2. Now, hearing that, you might initially be concerned of what was cut or what was potentially lost from version 2 to version 3. Really, I think we've managed to retain the comprehensiveness of the standard and the rigor while removing some of the more low value or redundant requirements. So while the standard is shorter than version 2, we haven't lost anything in terms of meaningful water stewardship practice. Another adjustment that's been made is the balance between core, gold, and platinum requirements has been adjusted to improve the accessibility of the standard while retaining rigor. So those core requirements really represent the essential elements of good water stewardship practice, while gold and platinum are there to recognize the higher levels of ambition and achievement when it comes to water stewardship performance. Another area of improvement is around improved auditability of the standard. We really sought to make the requirements of the standard clearer for both auditors and implementers alike. We set clear minimum expectations for conformance to reduce the room for interpretation. So you'll see throughout the standard, some changes which might be quite subtle, but really we've tightened up the wording to make things explicit where they need to be made explicit and to reduce any sort of ambiguity within the requirements. We've also set thresholds for performance against the 5 outcome areas of the standard at the core, gold, and platinum levels in step 3. I think this is a very significant change going from version 2 to version 3. Our standard is largely a management standard or a process-based standard, but this introduces an element of performance. So I think this is a really important development in terms of ensuring that the standard delivers impact. Version 3 also features a smaller, more focused set of advanced requirements at the gold and platinum levels, which build logically in the core requirements and provide a pathway for continual improvement. And I'll speak a little bit more about those changes to advanced certification. So in terms of our approach now to advanced certification, so conformance against all the core requirements remains the minimum for certification against AWS Standard. Sites that seek to obtain AWS certificate at the gold level must conform with those core requirements as well as 15 gold level requirements. Now, the biggest change here is to the platinum level of certification. So platinum certification is now specific to the outcome areas. So a site could achieve platinum certificate in, say, water governance or water governance and water quality. So any site seeking platinum certification must meet all of the core and gold requirements, plus a distinct set of platinum requirements which are associated with the relevant outcome area. This change was made in part for UCAS requirements to meet the ISO, I might get the number wrong here, 17067 standard, which really kind of enhances the credibility and the robustness of our system. I also think that it provides a more clear path for continual improvement in the standard, and I think a more efficient auditing process. Previously, in version 2 of the standard, we had an approach where there was a number of advanced requirements with scores allocated to them, and you had to reach a threshold to hit certain levels. I think the set of requirements we have now is more closely linked to what's there at the core level, which should make the process more efficient and I think lead to more significant outcomes. So on outcomes, we changed the outcome area, which was previously important water-related areas, to healthy freshwater ecosystems and biodiversity. There's a number of reasons behind this. I think the first was, to date, there was still quite a bit of confusion about the important water-related area outcome. Even over a decade into essentially implementation of the standard, there's still quite a bit of confusion in terms of what qualifies as an IWRA and what doesn't. At the same time, we really wanted to highlight the importance of biodiversity in this next version of the standard, which led us to make this change. So we have a set of revised requirements which now focus on the identification and assessment of freshwater ecosystems and species, and the development and implementation of targets and actions to protect, conserve, or restore them. We've also managed to retain the social and cultural elements of the IWRA outcome through revised requirements to respect the social, cultural, and recreational uses of water within the catchment. Another significant area in the revision was climate and resilience. When we initially did the review of version 2, this really came through as a top priority for the revision. We have new core requirements for sites to understand climate trends and water-related impacts in their catchment, including changes in precipitation and extreme events like floods and droughts. There's also a new gold level requirement for sites to climate-proof their water stewardship plan to build resilience to water risks associated with climate trends within the catchment. Additionally, we've made revisions to ensure the applicability of the standard to sites that depend on desalinated water, as well as to recognize and encourage water reuse where appropriate. Collective action was another area where we received, I think, a lot of feedback, and a lot of our users, felt this was a high priority for the standard. The standard outcome areas typically can't be fully achieved for a catchment by a single site alone. It really requires collective action of different actors within the catchment to make a significant impact. So therefore, an important principle of good water stewardship and a feature of the standard is collective action within the catchment, inclusive of the site and its relevant stakeholders. So in recognition of this importance, version 3 features collective action at the core, gold, and platinum levels to varying degrees. This is laid out in criteria 3.7 and really has a kind of increasing levels of essentially, I would say, involvement in collective action for the site. So recognizing that, at all levels of water stewardship, collective action is a key feature. Finally, is the strengthened integration with corporate level reporting. So the concept of double materiality has been incorporated into the standard through a new requirement to identify water-related impacts and dependencies as a precursor to identifying risks and opportunities. Version 3 is also highly interoperable with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directives E3 Water Standard. So information that's gathered for implementation of version 3 can directly inform reporting on all the E3 indicators, including policies, targets, and actions related to water. And we will be developing some specific guidance for sites who are using version 3 of the standard to aggregate and report on the information gathered for their CSRD reporting. We've also revamped the glossary within the standard, and we sought to align our definitions with frameworks such as TNFD and CDP, as well as a number of our peers in the water stewardship community. So as I said, that's a fairly rapid tour of the most significant changes to the standard. I would encourage you to download the summary document where you can find a detailed log of all the changes from version 2 to version 3. I'm now going to hand over to members of the technical committee, Fridtjof, Behnsen, and Laura Kowalski, to offer their reflections on the revision process and version 3 of the standard. Thank you.
I'm not sure if me or Fridtjof is first.
Well,
Fridtjof, did you want to
sorry,
go?
Since you're speaking, Laura, we can start with you.
Sure, sounds great. Thanks, Tyler. So I wanted to start out just by recognizing the work that Tyler's done. He's our liaison with the technical committee, and it's his job to consolidate all the comments and then consolidate all of our thoughts and changes. And it's a lot of work in a group of global volunteers, and he made it look easy, even though it's definitely not easy. So thanks to Tyler for that. So throughout this standard revision process, there are 4 things that stood out to me, and a lot of them are what Tyler kind of highlighted, but I'll just kind of go over my thoughts on them. So I think as a member of the private sector, simplification of the standard is really important. It lowers the barrier for entry for others to come in and use the standard, which is obviously the goal, to have as many users as possible, implementers as possible. So I don't think that was an effort in making it easier. It was really a consolidation effort. So 26 fewer requirements just really makes it more user-friendly and easier to interpret. So that sticks out to me as a really positive change. I think the other piece is that inherent flexibility built in for materiality. At the center of any sustainability strategy is the concept of materiality. So the built-in ability to focus on one of the outcomes at the advanced level when you're seeking platinum certification really helps sites to be able to understand what's material to them, what are their shared challenges, what are their stakeholders asking for. And so I think that's a really positive change in the right direction as well. Third, the deeper connection to climate. I think since climate and water are obviously so intricately linked, it's important to incorporate climate more into the standard. And then from a corporate sustainability perspective in the private sector, it's helpful to look at a sustainability strategy holistically rather than in silos. So instead of having, this group work on water, this group work on climate, this group work on biodiversity, you can kind of have that integration as well. And it just helps you to have like a deeper view of sustainability challenges within an organization. And then I think this connection could also help to unlock different funding mechanisms as it relates to water stewardship work. Global climate goals tend to be more global and kind of maybe easier to understand at the corporate level. And so I think that it's something that's at top of mind for investors. And I just think that's a positive connection to make as well. The last thing I had to highlight was something that I was personally really invested in, and that's supply chain water use. And I know this was something that was a bigger topic of discussion. And I think we landed in a spot where we definitely see a need for supply chain water to be quantified and managed. But we also realize that perhaps a site level water stewardship standard isn't the primary mechanism for that. And so the way that I see it, supply chains aren't often managed at the site level. So asking the implementers of a site level water stewardship standard to understand, manage their supply chain or indirect water use is perhaps a little bit challenging and increases that barrier for entry and the usability of the standard. So I think that the de-emphasis on indirect water use in the site level water stewardship standard opens up different mechanisms that AWS can look at to manage supply chain water. And perhaps some of you have been following the conversations that are ongoing regarding agricultural supply chain water use. And I think there's definitely more opportunity there. So Those are my highlights. I'll hand it over to Fridtjof for his. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And yeah, let me continue also as member of the technical committee. So we're representing the public sector side. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. But yeah, let me also start from the review process. And I came in halfway through the process, but was onboarded very quickly. And yeah, great process led by Tyler. And also the way the technical committee went about, 3,000 comments integrated into what is now the new AWS standard, and also looking back into what were issues that came up in the auditing under the 2.0 standard, integrated to make it just a little bit more free flowing and less issues along that. The key reflections from my side on the new AWS 3.0. First thing is, it retains the need for looking at collective action from core through gold and platinum, and provides clearer guidance there. So that, as the spirit of stewardship, obviously that is required. The second one, the integrating more of the climate perspective, water risk and climate risks is key, because it gives, first of all, a different dimension of developing narratives around that, and creating risk assessments that can be communicated across broader group of stakeholders to onboard them possibly. And the same thing goes for biodiversity, to see how water stewardship develops co-benefits for biodiversity and freshwater ecosystems in the catchments. Looking at it from sort of engaging policy sector side, I think the making the entry level at core level not less demanding, but it's more. It's been made easier to understand, and my hope is that while this is a corporate water stewardship tool, I would like to see that we can also get other stakeholders sort of onboarded, because it's easier to understand, and coming around the joint sort of water risk narrative, that we can build larger groups of entities sort of working in that space. Maybe those are the key sort of aspects that I would like to highlight again. And yeah, I mean, the new standard really strengthens clarity, keeps on supporting inclusivity, and enables effective collective action in this increasingly complex water and climate challenges that we are all facing. So these are just a few of my personal highlights from that process, and with that, I'd like to hand back to Scott to take it from here.
All right, thanks very much, Fridtjof. Thanks very much, Laura. I'm going to hand over to Scott from Haleon in a second. Before I do, I just want to talk about the link between AWS and the Alliance. So I said at the beginning that the standard is a manifestation of our mission. The point of the Alliance is to activate that mission. And relative to the standard, our role is to activate it through providing resources, providing tools, providing training, advocating for an enabling environment that creates incentives for water stewardship, connections with reporting, and so on and so forth. But one of the major things we do is peer-to-peer learning. We're very, very keen on not talking to AWS staff about water stewardship, but talking to people who've done water stewardship to help you achieve your water stewardship goals. So I'm just framing Scott's comments that are to come around an example of the things that we do in the communities of practice and in the things that we do at the forum. So the communities of practice is a kind of online sessions that we have, which are very similar to the AWS forum, but online, so more accessible. With that, I'll hand over to Scott to give his reflections, coming from a place where he's implemented the standard in his business. Scott?
Well, thank you, Scott. My name's Scott Oram. I'm the Global Water Lead at Haleon. We're a consumer healthcare company focused on better everyday health, so water is very core to our mission. We have a global presence in oral healthcare, respiratory pain, and supplement brands as well. We have a sustainability standard, of which water is a big part of it. And we had targets by 2025 to achieve core certification at our manufacturing sites to the AWS Standard, which we achieved at the end of last year. And that's not the end. We're going to keep working towards the outcomes of the standard through version 2 and version 3. And that's continual longer term. We stay committed to that. So thank you for inviting me for this celebration of the standard as it moved to version 3. It's all very exciting. I'll give you a few reflections about version 2 implementation and the value that we sort of get out of it, and a few on version 3 as well, which I'm equally nervous and excited about implementing. So the first thing I would say about implementing and our experience is it takes work. It's great to hear you're lowering the barrier to entry through taking away some of the complexity. I think that will really help. And I know a lot of you on the call who are implementers or certified to the standard will know it takes work. You'll need dedicated resources from a central point to run the program, and you'll need dedicated teams locally as well. And I noticed there are some consultants on the call. They're very helpful in helping with those peaks of workload and capability as well. So it does take an element of outside of the normal skill set that we have in manufacturing or research development or comms and government affairs to implement the standard, especially when it comes to things like stakeholder engagement. And again, you might seek help training or help from consultants in that as well. There's a steep learning curve, but it's worth the work. We have a deeper understanding of water-related topics and how they affect local communities where we operate, and that's really important because that empowers us to become involved in those topics. And a lot of those communities locally, when we think suppliers, regulators, people that we work with, they're really important to make sure that our sites keep working, keep manufacturing, keep making a product, right? It's the license to operate, and that is so important. Another key thing is resilience locally at site. Through the work on the standard, I feel like, and the interaction with stakeholders, we really do understand those shareable challenges in a lot more depth than we would have otherwise done so. And that knowledge equips us with the ability to react to it through our plans and increases the resilience of the site through lots of different factors, whether social or environmental. And the very fact of the focus shift towards water. I mean, we mentioned energy. I think Laura mentioned energy is very at the center of a lot of strategies. Bringing a focus on water through the standard has been really beneficial and developed a culture of focus on water and a focus on people and communities and nature locally, which has been brilliant. And we learned a lot in the audits too. I'm not just saying that because there's a couple of WSAS auditors on the call. At a corporate level, we first went for the standard because of the credibility. I think, Tyler mentioned it, how rigorous the standard is and what high bar that our alliance, the community, sets for water stewardship. And we really wanted to lean into that as a company. We incorporated in July 2022. So we were new, no one knew us. People might know our brands, but didn't know us. So we wanted to lean into that and certify rather than just implement, because we didn't want to mark our own homework. It also prepared us for longer term goals. So I mentioned at the beginning, we've implemented the standard across our manufacturing sites. Now we're really looking at those outcomes within the standard and how we might invest in community or nature-based solutions locally around the site, especially in high-stressed areas. So we have goals that run to 2030. So it gives us a real solid foundation to achieve those goals over time. And I refer back to the standard and the work that we do these sites time and time again, which tells me that it's useful, right? If it was a one bit of effort and park it, I wouldn't be referring back to it all the time. And then I think Laura also mentioned the silos that sometimes exist within organizations. We've got one person working on biodiversity, one person on water, one person on human rights. Well, a lot of the work we've done through the implementation of the standard means that when my human rights person comes and talks to me and says, Scott, what are you doing about access to clean water and equitable access? We have something already in place. that we're able to talk to them. So it's a salient risk within our human rights risk assessment, and we've already got a good amount of work towards mitigating those risks and doing the right thing in the right places. And the same in nature as well. It's a material risk within our double materiality assessment when we look at TNFD. So we've made a significant amount of progress just because we knew it was the right thing to do. And then the nature standards kind of caught up around it. So it's become really, really valuable for us, and we continue to believe that. So we see huge opportunity to continue to grow, and I'm really looking forward to that interoperability to keep adding value. Looking forward, I say an equal measure of excitement and a little bit of nervousness around implementing version 3, because I know it's reduced in complexity, it's changed for all the right reasons, right? But if 2 years of implementation has told me anything across multiple sites, is nothing simple. But nevertheless, I'm looking forward to the double materiality and climate scenario analysis elements of it that are being incorporated. I mean, what will be interesting is a lot of those types of frameworks are set at a global level. So you'll look at a whole entire company across the value chain globally for double materiality assessment and for climate scenario analysis as well. So how you translate that from up here to a site level is going to be really interesting, and how much work we've done up here can be translated to a site level and meet the requirements of the standard. And exactly the same for climate change. We do our scenario analysis into the future using global data sets. So how will that translate from global to local, and what will that look like, and what will those conversations look like with the auditors and on site at the time? I also like this clear minimum expectation for conformance. I think one of the things that always draws my eye as I was reading through was this need for collective action. Now, we spend a lot of time talking about defining collective action, what it is, who must be involved, at what level. And I think there's going to be a lot of talk about that locally, especially as I know that sometimes when you implement the standard in a particular area, you might be the first one to do so. You know, no one else wants to talk to you about water stewardship or water, and how do you strike up those conversations, and how does that count as collective action? You know, is it just those initial conversations if you spark an interest to that big investment in nature-based solutions? What does that look like? So I'm looking forward to it. Very much so, version 3. I mean, I get questions from my consumer and customer-facing teams all the time about how we can talk to the communities and people we serve through our brands and our products, and derive that value from the standard in that way as well. So I'm looking forward to how we continue to explore that within version 3. And yeah, it's looking forward to it over the next 18 months, and we've got some sites that are going to be moving pretty quickly to version 3 within the next sort of 12 months, moving a bit earlier, and they're going to teach us a lot. So hopefully in the next 12 months, we'll learn a lot and be able to share through those communities of practice that Scott mentioned, because they are so valuable. I'll just sort of finish by saying the network itself, as well as the implementation of the standard, is so important in this space. We get a lot out of being members, and we get a lot out of sharing what we do and learning from others as well. So I'll hand back over to you, Scott.
Great, thanks very much, Scott. So it's always weird with two Scots kind of thing. It's sort of like being Scottish. I went to school with 3 different Scottish people, 3 different people called Scott. So to pick up on what he was saying there, it's sort of like the focus of the organisation, of the alliance, etc., over the coming period will be in helping people implement the standard. And we'll do that in terms of the publications that we put out, the updates to the Tools Hub, the updates to kind of resources. Tyler's going to touch on the guidance that's coming out, etc. But a lot of this really is learning from each other. So that's what I'm saying, that the strength of activity really is in the alliance part. Tyler, I'll hand over to you to talk about the transitions part, and then we've got Q&A.
Great, thank you, Scott. Yeah, so I'm just going to speak briefly about really what comes next with version 3. So with the standard now published, our attention turns to essentially guidance, training, and audits. So the AWS Standard version 3 guidance is in the final stages of review, and it's anticipated to be published by the end of April. You know, the standard itself was a big undertaking, but so is development of the guidance, and we really want to make sure that we get this right for our users. So please do look forward to that, and we'll be sharing that through all our channels. Registration to the AWS Standard System training on version 3 is now available on our website. So our flagship training course is the AWS Standard System training. It's comprised of 4 half-day sessions, and this has been fully updated to the version 3 of the standard. So this course will equip you with the knowledge and practical understanding required to apply version 3 with confidence. For those who have recently completed AWS Standard System training within the last 4 years, we will provide you with access to an on-demand learning module, which will help you with the transition from version 2 to version 3. We are aiming to have that shared by the end of April, and you'll be sent access to a link to watch that recording. Finally, audits against version 3 of the standard will become available starting in May. We already have a couple audits scheduled for May and June for version 3, who are those who are eager to switch over. And those will be quickly ramping up over the next year. So with the launch of the standard, we now enter a 1-year transition period. So after this 1-year transition period, all the initial and recertification audits will be conducted against version 3 of the standard. For sites that are already certified against version 2 or that choose to use version 2 for their initial or recertification audits during the transition period, your surveillance audits will be conducted against version 2. So you will only have surveillance audits against the version which you were initially certified with. Sites may choose to receive a new certification audit against version 3 before their existing V2 certificate expires. That is an option. And if you'd like to explore that, I would encourage you to contact WASAS. So yeah, that's a few quick notes on the transition, and I'll pass it back over to you, Scott, for the Q&A.
Okay, great. I have a joint question from Carlos Hernandez Alcantar about stakeholders and the way that stakeholder engagement has been talked about in the new version. So repeated use of the expression all stakeholders throughout the standard may generate ambiguity during the audit process. Process of selecting stakeholders and all the indicators suggest an undefined, unlimited universe could allow you auditors to issue non-conformities based solely on their personal judgment regarding who should be included in the stakeholder identification process. Relatedly, what is the logic behind the expression all stakeholders instead of another term?
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. Stakeholder engagement was one of the themes that we worked on in the revision, and really what we sought to do was reduce ambiguity within the requirements. So you'll see now that in the criteria in 1.2, we split the requirements quite clearly between stakeholder identification and engagement. So in the first instance, we're asking sites to first identify, who are all the stakeholders within the catchment. We give a list of stakeholder and groups to be considered. Now, when it comes to engagement, we're not asking the site to engage every single stakeholder. Rather, we're asking them to come up with a process and to essentially justify whom they're engaging with. And we ask for representation from those different groups. So where any of those groups, such as local governments, environmental NGOs, indigenous groups, where those groups are present, we ask that they be represented. So the idea for stakeholder engagement is for it to be representative of these different groups rather than exhaustive. So in version 2 of the standard, there was quite a bit of, I think, ambiguity around stakeholder engagement. We received lots of questions of how many stakeholders is enough? Is it 5? Is it 10? What's the cutoff? What we really sought to do was to reduce that ambiguity and provide a quite explicit explanation of the requirements. So you'll see there's cross-referencing throughout the standard for later requirements on stakeholder engagement where you refer to all stakeholders. It explicitly ties back to the stakeholders that were engaged for requirement 1.2.2. And again, this will be made, further guidance will be provided on this in the version 3 guidance document.
Thanks very much, Tyler. As in the previous webinars, a lot of the questions are about the guidance. We've got a question from Rianne about the launch for the translated standard and the guidance. Can you kind of reiterate when translations of the standard, when the guidance coming out, when the translations of the guidance coming out, etc.?
Yes. So the standard is now published in all the language versions. So we have, as well as English, we have Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, Bangla, Arabic, and French versions, which are all available now for download on the AWS website. The guidance document will first be released in English. That will be released by the end of April. That's our target for publication of the guidance. And after that, we will be translating it into those corresponding languages in which the standard is published. I cannot provide an exact timeline for that, but that will be made a priority. And essentially, we should see those translations coming within a couple months of the guidance being published.
Great. The request to see the previous slide, Tyler. Can you put the previous slide back up?
Yes.
Do you want to just recap that?
Sure, no problem. I think so. Now that we've published the standard, we have a 1-year transition period for transitioning from version 2 to version 3. So during this 1-year transition period, sites that are going for their initial or recertification audits will have a choice of using version 2 or version 3. After the 1-year transition period, all the initial and recertification audits will be against version 3. For the sites that are already certified to version 2, your surveillance audits will be to version 2. So if you were just certified to version 2, let's say earlier this year, you will have your surveillance audits against that version. We won't ask you to make the transition kind of mid-certificate cycle. Yeah, hopefully that gives a little bit more clarity around the transition. But if you do have further questions about that, you can reach out to us directly, and we're happy to field any questions.
Yeah, my email address is Scott, SCOTT, @a4ws.org. If you just email me anything, and I can transfer to whoever. Question about the recordings and the slides. Yes, the recording and the slides were made available. They'll be sent out to everybody who participated. The other thing is, everything about AWS goes into the newsletter. So if there's ever anything that you want to know, you sign up to the newsletter, read the newsletter. Similarly, things are on the website. Related to that, Megan, can you touch on training? What the dates are for the training now that AWS Standard version 3 training is live?
Yes, happy to. So yes, as was mentioned previously, our AWS standard system training for version 3 is now available. All the dates are available on our website. There was a link dropped into the chat a little bit ago, so you can see all of those dates. We now have dates booked for version 3 of the training from April through July. During the transition period, we also will be holding version 2 of the training quarterly. So you can also see those dates on the website as well. And as Tyler mentioned, if you were recently trained, we'll be sharing a link with everyone that participated in those trainings soon. That's kind of a quicker course to just kind of help you get up to speed.
Yeah, great. And when we send out the slides, we'll put in all of the links that are in the chat box. One other thing, just to kind of double back on transitioning guidance and so on and so forth, Tyler, there's a question that came up in one of the earlier sessions, which is, will the guidance be navigating, kind of mapping between version 2 and version 3, explaining kind of the connections between 2 and so on and so forth, mapping redundancies, mapping additions, etc.?
Well, I guess short answer is No, in the sense that the version 3 guidance will be
about the guidance.
two version 3 requirements. So essentially, the format of the guidance will remain largely the same in the sense that it's essentially going to give for each of the requirements of the standard, it will give an overview of the intent of it, how to implement, examples, as well as templates and external references. So it will be specific to version 3 of the standard. I would say in terms of the an overview of the differences between version 2 and version 3, we already have that summary of changes document, and I would really encourage users of the standard to download and review that. It goes kind of criteria by criteria and requirement within the standard and sets out essentially what has changed from version 2 to version 3 in a very detailed way. So we encourage everyone to have a look at that.
Okay, but maybe we can look at that internally and kind of see if there's another way of updating that, just so that it's kind of very, very accessible and we can put in the newsletters. Cool. Mm-hmm. I don't see any other questions. As I said, I'm like, thanks very much for joining. I want to reiterate the point about the connection between the standard as a manifestation of our mission and the alliance as a way to activate our mission. I'd strongly encourage people to sign up to the newsletter, to take part in communities of practice. If you're not a member, consider becoming a member, etc., etc. And if you need anything, please just get in touch. Get in touch with Tyler, get in touch with myself, get in touch with any of the team. Our contact details are on the website. My personal contact details are scott@a4ws.org. Always happy to hear from you. Connect on LinkedIn, whatever. With that, I just want to say thanks very much to everyone. Thanks very much for all the speakers. Thanks to Laura and Fridtjof. Thanks to Scott. Thanks to José, Tyler, Megan, and thanks to you for attending. Hopefully see you soon. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Take care.